In a world obsessed with filters and facades, the most powerful magnetism comes from what we dare not show. What if the key to becoming truly unforgettable isn't found in perfection, but in the courage to be unapologetically real? Carl Jung, the master of the human psyche, revealed a profound truth. We don't desire what appears flawless, we're drawn to what feels authentic. The 7 paradoxical traits of an unforgettable woman aren't what society taught us to value. They're hidden in plain sight, in the shadows we're told to hide, in the intensity we're taught to dim. This isn't about becoming someone new. It's about unleashing who you've always been beneath the masks. The woman no one wants to lose isn't seeking to be irreplaceable, and that's precisely why she is. In a world where everything changes at a dizzying pace, there is something that remains immutable: the desire for genuine connection. We all seek meaningful relationships, bonds that don't unravel with time or fade at the first difficulty. But what makes a woman become someone unforgettable? Not in a superficial sense, but in the deepest part of one's being that transforms her into that presence impossible to ignore, that spirit that leaves an imprint on the memory and heart of those who know her. Carl Jung, with his exploration of the human psyche, left us clues about what really makes us irresistible. It's not about appearance or meeting external expectations. It's something more essential, more visceral. It's an energy that emanates from deep within, a power that needs no display or confirmation. And today, we're going to discover the 7 keys that can make you that woman no one wants to lose. From childhood, we are taught many things about how we should be. We're told we must be kind, accommodating, always willing to yield to avoid conflicts. But what happens when all that education takes us away from our essence? Jung spoke of the repressed self, that part of us that we sacrifice to fit in. But true magnetism emerges when we stop molding ourselves for others and dare to be without fear, without masks. There is a quality that all unforgettable people have in common: authenticity, that ability to be at peace with who they are without pretending to be something else. In a world saturated with appearances, being authentic is an act of courage. And when a woman allows herself to be completely herself, without fear of being judged, she projects a confidence that is impossible to ignore. But authenticity doesn't mean rigidity. It's not about saying, "This is how I am, and I won't change," but about evolving from a genuine place. Jung spoke of the individuation process, that internal journey in which we discover and accept ourselves, but also transform ourselves. The woman no one wants to lose is not one who clings to a static version of herself, but one who dares to explore every corner of her soul, who grows without losing herself, who changes without betraying herself. Personal magnetism is not something that can be faked. It arises from a deep connection with one's own essence, from a confidence that doesn't depend on external approval. And this confidence doesn't mean arrogance, but a silent certainty that you are enough, not because others say so, but because you feel it in the deepest part of your being. Jung said that everything we deny about ourselves ends up dominating us from the shadows. The unforgettable woman doesn't hide her imperfections. She's not ashamed of her wounds. She recognizes them, integrates them, and turns them into part of her strength. Every encounter we have with someone leaves a mark, however small. Sometimes it's a fleeting sensation, other times an echo that persists in time. The difference between an ephemeral presence and an indelible one lies in the depth of the impact. And this depth is not achieved with grand gestures, but with the ability to touch something genuine in the other. The problem is that we're often taught to avoid intensity, to not feel too much, to not be too passionate, too emotional, too demanding. We're trained to contain ourselves, to minimize our light, to not make others uncomfortable. But in reality, what makes a woman unforgettable is precisely her capacity to feel, not from drama or neediness, but from a deep connection with her own energy. Carl Jung spoke of the anima and animus, the feminine and masculine principles within each human being. A woman who has integrated both forces in herself is a woman who doesn't need anyone to complete her, because she already feels whole. She doesn't seek others to give her value because she already possesses it. She doesn't beg for love because she understands that the love she seeks outside must first exist within her. And when a woman moves with that security, with that fullness, her presence becomes magnetic. But this doesn't mean closing herself off to others. It's not about becoming inaccessible or building walls. The woman no one wants to lose is not one who appears distant or indifferent, but one who knows how to open up without losing herself in the other, who gives herself without becoming blurred, who loves without her love depending on external approval. And this is what makes her unforgettable, because there is nothing rarer in this world than someone who knows how to love from freedom and not from lack. When a woman knows herself, when she has explored her shadows and embraced her lights, she becomes unpredictable, not in the sense of being inconsistent or volatile, but in the sense that she cannot be pigeonholed because she doesn't define herself in terms of anyone else. This is the woman who surprises, who doesn't let herself be trapped by worn-out routines or imposed roles. She is the woman who always has something new to discover because she herself is in constant exploration. Jung spoke of the concept of the shadow, that hidden part of our psyche where we store what we fear, what we deny, what we've been told is not acceptable. Many women live trapped in a limited version of themselves because they have learned to repress their desires, their impulses, their true voice. But the unforgettable woman does not fear her shadow. On the contrary, she confronts it, embraces it, understands that by doing so, she liberates herself. When a woman accepts her complexity, when she stops fragmenting herself into more acceptable versions for others, she becomes an overwhelming presence. She no longer needs to pretend. She no longer needs to fit into molds that are too small for her. Her authenticity becomes her greatest strength, and that is something no one wants to let go, because truth, in any form, is addictive. The most powerful attraction is not born from appearance, but from depth. Jung said that true relationships are not between masks, but between souls. The woman no one wants to lose is one with whom you can share silence without feeling uncomfortable, one who doesn't fear deep conversations, who doesn't evade the uncomfortable, who dares to explore the dark corners of the soul without fear of what she might find. There is an enigmatic quality in a woman who knows herself. She doesn't need to announce her value or seek constant validation, because her security emanates from a deeper place, a place to which very few have access. This security is not arrogance, not superiority, but the inner peace of someone who has walked their own path without fear of facing themselves. Jung said that most people live trapped in masks, playing roles that society has imposed on them. But the woman no one wants to lose is one who has broken those chains and has decided to be without apologies. True attractiveness doesn't reside in perfection, but in authenticity. In a world where so many people pretend to be what they're not, where appearances are often valued more than essence, a woman who isn't afraid to show her truth is like a magnet. She doesn't try to fit into pre-established molds. She doesn't shape herself to please. She doesn't seek acceptance at the cost of her essence. Her presence is a declaration of freedom, and that's something that resonates with those around her. But this freedom doesn't mean solitude. It's not a barrier that prevents closeness, but a bridge that makes it even more attractive. Jung spoke of the concept of individuation, the process by which a person becomes their authentic self. The unforgettable woman is one who has traveled this path, and in doing so, has learned to be alone without feeling lonely. She doesn't fear company, but she doesn't desperately seek it either. She knows that a relationship is not an escape, but a meeting between two complete beings. When a woman stops seeking love from a place of lack and begins to love from a place of fullness, her energy changes. She no longer needs to prove anything. She no longer seeks to be chosen. She no longer begs for attention. And it's precisely at that moment that she becomes irresistible, because true attraction is not born from need, but from abundance. The woman no one wants to lose is one who chooses from freedom, not from fear. Jung said that the collective unconscious is full of archetypes that influence the way we relate. One of the most powerful is that of the wise woman, one who has integrated all her parts and doesn't fear her own light or her own darkness. This woman is not the most accommodating, not the one who seeks approval, not the one who fears making others uncomfortable. She is the one who awakens something deep in others, who makes those who know her unable to see her as just anyone else. Her magnetism is not based on manipulation or superficial strategies, but on the truth of her being. Her presence transforms, not because she tries to, but because her energy is too intense not to leave a mark. She doesn't strive to be liked, and paradoxically, that makes her even more desirable. She doesn't try to retain anyone, and yet her absence leaves a void impossible to fill. This woman doesn't fear being intense, doesn't fear feeling too much, doesn't fear showing herself vulnerable. She understands that vulnerability is not weakness, but one of the purest forms of strength. She doesn't hide behind emotional barriers or play at indifference. She knows that love, friendship, real connection require courage, and that courage is precisely what makes her unforgettable. The difference between someone who goes unnoticed and someone who leaves an indelible mark doesn't lie in what they say or do, but in what they awaken in others. The woman no one wants to lose is one who manages to touch invisible fibers, who leaves an imprint that doesn't fade with time. Her presence is not ephemeral because it's not based on the superficial, but on the energy she transmits, on the sense of depth that surrounds her. She's not someone who simply accompanies. She's someone who transforms, someone who changes the way others perceive the world. Jung spoke of the importance of integrating all parts of our being, even those that society has taught us to repress. The unforgettable woman is not one who seeks to be perfect, but one who accepts her own complexity. She doesn't fear her contradictions. She's not ashamed of her shadows. She doesn't try to fit into a reduced idea of what it means to be a woman. She understands that there is strength in tenderness, but also in firmness, that there is beauty in softness, but also in determination. She doesn't define herself by a single aspect, because she is an entire universe in herself. When a woman stops trying to be good in the conventional sense and starts being authentic, something changes in her gaze, in her way of moving, in her way of speaking. She no longer seeks constant approval. She no longer fears being judged. She no longer needs to be validated to feel complete. This security is not something that is imposed, not something that is forcibly exhibited. It's something that is simply felt, that others perceive without the need for words. But this security doesn't mean arrogance. The woman no one wants to lose is not one who believes herself superior to others, but one who has learned to value herself without the need to compare herself. Her self-esteem doesn't depend on the attention she receives, but on the love she has for herself. And it's precisely because of this that she doesn't fear being alone, that she doesn't cling to relationships that don't nourish her, that she doesn't beg for affection where there is none. This woman isn't unforgettable because she tries to be. She doesn't follow seduction rules. She doesn't apply strategies. She doesn't play at being unreachable. She is unforgettable because her energy cannot be replaced, because her essence is unique and doesn't try to fit into any mold. When she's present, it's felt, and when she leaves, her absence weighs. But the most important thing of all is that she doesn't seek to be the woman no one wants to lose. She doesn't live with the intention of leaving an imprint. She doesn't obsess over the idea of being remembered. She simply lives with intensity, with truth, with a self-love that doesn't depend on anyone else. And paradoxically, it's precisely that which makes her impossible to forget. There is a subtle, powerful difference between a woman who simply is present and one who truly exists. The first follows patterns, responds to expectations, adapts to what others want from her. The second, on the other hand, is a force in herself, someone who isn't defined by what others project onto her, but by her own inner knowledge. Carl Jung spoke of the individuation process as a journey towards the totality of being, a path that not everyone is willing to walk. The woman no one wants to lose has walked that path, has faced her shadows, has discovered her own light. She's not perfect, but she has learned to embrace every part of herself without fear or shame. One of the most fascinating characteristics of these women is their capacity for connection, but not a superficial connection based on the need for attention or emotional dependency. Their connection with others is authentic because they have first learned to connect with themselves. They don't seek to fill voids with fleeting company. They don't fear silence. They don't need the constant validation of others to feel complete. In a society where distraction is the norm, where few really stop to listen, a woman who knows how to be present, who looks into your eyes with intention, who speaks with meaning, becomes someone unforgettable. But it's not just about how she relates to others, but how she relates to life itself. There is a vibrant energy in a woman who lives with purpose, in someone who has found something that moves her, that drives her beyond the ordinary. It doesn't have to be something grand in the eyes of the world. It's not about fame or external recognition. It can be an art, a passion, a personal quest. What makes her special is that she doesn't live on autopilot. She doesn't settle for merely existing. Her enthusiasm, her dedication, her love for what she does are contagious. People around her feel it, are inspired by it, and that creates a bond that's difficult to break. Jung spoke of the archetype of the inner goddess, that part of the feminine psyche that embodies wisdom, intuition, and creative strength. The woman no one wants to lose has awakened that part in herself. It doesn't mean she's unbreakable, that she doesn't have moments of doubt or vulnerability. It means she has learned to trust her intuition, to listen to her inner voice, instead of drowning it out with external noise. She doesn't make decisions based on fear. She doesn't allow herself to be manipulated. She doesn't let herself be dragged by circumstances that don't resonate with her truth. Her life is an expression of who she really is, not what others expect her to be. Emotional independence is another of the traits that define her. She doesn't confuse love with possession, nor attention with genuine affection. She doesn't cling to what doesn't belong to her. She doesn't try to retain those who don't want to stay. She understands that relationships must be free, that true love is not imposed or demanded. Her confidence is not in others choosing her, but in knowing she has the power to choose. She doesn't fear losing anyone because she knows the only truly irreplaceable thing is her own essence. And this confidence is not based on coldness or extreme detachment. On the contrary, the woman no one wants to lose is deeply passionate. She feels with intensity, she loves with dedication, but she does it from a place of fullness and not of lack. She doesn't play at being unreachable to generate interest. She doesn't need to manipulate to maintain someone's attention. It's precisely her transparency that makes her irresistible. She's not an illusion or a fantasy constructed to please. She's real, with all that implies. There's something liberating in her way of living. She doesn't ask permission to be who she is. She doesn't hide behind masks. She doesn't suppress her nature to fit into obsolete molds. Her presence discomforts those who aren't ready to face their own truth, but inspires those who seek the authentic, because deep down, we all long for something real, something that transcends the superficial. And when a woman embodies that truth, she becomes unforgettable. But her value doesn't lie in the admiration she awakens in others. She's not unforgettable because others recognize her, but because she recognizes herself. Her strength doesn't come from what others think of her, but from the inner certainty that her existence has meaning. Her life doesn't revolve around approval, nor does her self-esteem depend on the number of people who desire her. She loves herself not because she's perfect, but because she has learned to respect herself in each of her facets. And that is one of the most powerful lessons she can leave with those around her. There's something indisputable in the energy of a woman who has allowed herself to evolve without fear of the unknown. She's not someone who has simply transited through life without questions, but someone who has looked straight at her own contradictions, who has allowed each experience to transform her without losing her essence. Carl Jung spoke of the importance of integrating all parts of the psyche, of not rejecting the uncomfortable aspects of oneself, but understanding them and giving them a place within the totality of being. The woman no one wants to lose is not one who embodies a perfect and unreachable image, but one who has learned to live with authenticity, embracing both her light and her shadows. She's not a woman who seeks recognition at all costs, nor one who needs to impress with grand gestures. Her attractiveness lies in the subtlety of her presence, in the way she moves through the world with a confidence that doesn't need to be announced. She doesn't need to prove anything. She doesn't seek to convince anyone of her worth, because her mere existence is already an affirmation. And this security is not a disguise or a mask to hide insecurities, but the result of deep internal work, of a personal exploration that has allowed her to know herself without self-deception. The difference between someone who simply adapts to circumstances and someone who is capable of influencing their environment doesn't lie in brute force or imposition, but in the clarity with which that person projects themselves into the world. The unforgettable woman is not one who shouts loudest or demands to be seen, but the one who, without apparent effort, leaves an indelible mark on the memory of those who know her, not because she wants to, but because her authenticity makes her unmistakable. Self-knowledge has given her an advantage that few people have, the ability to decide from consciousness and not from inertia or fear. Jung spoke of how most people live trapped in unconscious patterns, repeating the same dynamics without realizing it. But when a woman awakens, when she takes control of her own narrative, she no longer lets herself be dragged by destiny, but creates it. Her decisions are not driven by the need to fit in, but by coherence with what she truly is. And this completely changes the way she relates to others. She doesn't seek to fill voids with superficial relationships, nor does she cling to connections that don't nourish her. She's not afraid of being alone, because she has learned to enjoy her own company. Her presence is not demanding, and doesn't absorb the energy of those around her, but enhances it. And that's why those who know her can't help but feel attracted to that energy, to that tranquility that comes from someone who has made peace with herself. But this doesn't mean she's inaccessible or distant. Her independence doesn't make her cold or indifferent. On the contrary, the woman no one wants to lose is deeply warm, but her warmth is not compliance or submission. Her love is free, without ties or manipulations. She doesn't seek to control or be controlled, but to share from a genuine place. And that's one of the reasons why her presence leaves such a deep impression, because when she chooses to be with someone, she does so from true choice, not from need. This woman is not unforgettable because she's perfect, but because she's real in a world where the authentic is increasingly scarce. She doesn't present herself as a filtered version of herself. She doesn't fear showing her humanity, her contradictions, her capacity to change her mind and evolve. She is not static. She doesn't cling to a fixed identity, but flows with life without losing her essence. Her power lies in her ability to transform without betraying herself, to grow without ceasing to be herself. And it's precisely this combination of strength and vulnerability that makes her so fascinating. She doesn't protect herself behind an unbreakable shell, but neither does she allow herself to be confused with someone fragile. She knows when to open up and when to establish limits, when to give herself and when to withdraw. She doesn't play at being difficult, but she's also not someone who can be possessed without more. Her love is not begged for or demanded. It's earned with time, with presence, with reciprocity. And those who have had the opportunity to really know her know that losing her means losing something irreplaceable. She's not someone who must be understood at first sight. She's not made for those seeking the easy, the obvious, the predictable. There's something in her way of existing that awakens questions, that leaves the feeling that there's always more to discover. She doesn't completely reveal herself immediately, not because she plays at being a mystery, but because her depth can't be reduced to a simple first impression. Her mind, her way of seeing the world, her way of moving in it are charged with nuances that can't be assimilated with a quick glance. To know her requires patience. To understand her requires a willingness to abandon superficiality. But she's not inaccessible. She doesn't hide or raise unnecessary walls. What happens is that her essence is not for everyone. She doesn't seek to fit with everyone or adapt to the expectations of others. She doesn't let herself be molded by the desires of others, nor does she allow her energy to be absorbed by those who don't know how to appreciate it. Her presence is not for those seeking passing entertainment or for those who fear depth. And that's precisely the reason why her impact is so strong. Because when she gives herself, she does so truly. She's not one of those who feign indifference or who play at being unreachable. She doesn't need strategies to seem more valuable, because her value is not in the perception of others, but in her own consciousness of herself. She doesn't move with the intention of generating obsession, nor does she worry about feeding others' egos. She is who she is, without disguises, without masks, without the weight of having to prove anything. Her security doesn't mean absence of doubts or moments of vulnerability, but the difference is that she doesn't let herself be defined by them. She doesn't fear facing her own thoughts. She doesn't run from what she feels. She doesn't need someone else to rescue her from her own silences. She finds in herself the answers that others desperately seek outside. She knows that her peace doesn't depend on anyone, and that's why she doesn't beg for company. She doesn't cling to what doesn't belong to her. She doesn't fear letting go of what no longer adds value. When she enters a room, her presence is felt without the need for effort. It's not that she seeks to be the center of attention, it's that her energy has a gravity of its own. There's something in the way she inhabits space, in the tranquility with which she moves, in the silent certainty she projects that makes her impossible to ignore. She doesn't need to raise her voice to be heard, nor exaggerate her gestures to be seen. Her mere existence is enough for her presence to leave a lasting impression. She's hard to forget because she doesn't look like anyone else. She doesn't try to be another person or follow a pre-established model. She doesn't seek approval or allow herself to be pigeonholed into what is expected of her. Her authenticity is an act of courage in a world that constantly pushes people to be copies of something else. She doesn't dilute in the crowd. She doesn't get lost in the need to be accepted. She sustains herself in her own truth, even when it discomforts, even when it means going against what others consider correct. And precisely because she is so genuine, the relationships she builds are not superficial. She doesn't surround herself with just anyone. She doesn't let everyone into her most intimate space. She knows how to distinguish between those who are just passing through and those who are really worth it. She's not one to settle for emotional crumbs or stay in bonds that don't enrich her. And that, far from making her inaccessible, makes her someone with whom connection is a transformative experience. She distinguishes herself without effort, not because she tries, but because her essence is too strong to be diluted in the crowd. She doesn't seek protagonism, but her presence doesn't go unnoticed. She's not someone who can be easily ignored, not because she imposes her existence on others, but because her energy leaves an imprint that endures. Her authenticity is a reflection of everything she has lived, of the decisions she has made, of the internal battles she has fought and won. She's not someone who has settled for what they gave her, but someone who built her own path, who chose which parts of herself to nurture and which to leave behind. She doesn't follow a pre-established script or allow herself to be defined by others' standards. Her identity is not shaped by the need to fit in, but by the deep connection she has with herself. She has learned to listen to her own voice in a world full of noise, to trust her intuition without the need for external validation. Her security is not arrogance or empty pride, but the result of having traveled a long path of self-discovery. She doesn't have to prove anything to anyone, because she already knows who she is. In her relationships, she doesn't play with others' feelings, nor does she allow them to play with hers. She's not one who chases or one who flees. She doesn't cling to what isn't real or get excited about empty promises. Her love is deep, but she doesn't give it to just anyone. She knows how to distinguish between those who deserve her energy and those who only seek to take advantage of her. She doesn't let herself be deceived by pretty words or carried away by ephemeral moments. Her connection with someone is not based on need, but on the conscious choice to share her life with someone who is at her level. The intensity of her gaze, the depth of her words, the way she gives herself when she truly trusts everything in her is proof that she doesn't stay on the surface. She's not one who lives in fear of feeling or who builds barriers for fear of being hurt. She allows herself to be vulnerable, but without losing her power. She doesn't fear love, but she doesn't idealize it either. She's not willing to settle for less than what she knows she deserves. And that's why those who lose her feel they've let go of something they can never replace. She doesn't fear solitude because she has learned to see it as a space for growth and not as a void that must be filled at all costs. She enjoys her own company. She feels at peace with herself. She doesn't seek distractions to avoid facing her thoughts, but welcomes them, analyzes them, transforms them into lessons. Her inner world is so vast that she never feels the need to seek outside what she already has within. And precisely because of this, when she chooses to share her time with someone, she does so with a total presence. She doesn't offer an incomplete version of herself. She doesn't hold back parts for fear of rejection. She shows herself as she is, without filters or edits. The way she lives her life is a statement in itself. She doesn't let fear stop her or uncertainty paralyze her. She knows that growth doesn't come from comfort, but from daring to go beyond self-imposed limits. She has learned to see failures as opportunities and losses as lessons. She doesn't cling to what no longer serves her. She doesn't carry what weighs more than necessary. Her lightness doesn't come from a lack of depth, but from the freedom of knowing she doesn't need to control every aspect of her life to be at peace. When she speaks, her words carry weight. She doesn't say things just to say them. She doesn't fill silence with trivialities. Her conversation is not a repetition of what everyone says, but an invitation to see the world from a different perspective. Her mind is in constant expansion, always seeking to learn, grow, evolve. She doesn't get stuck in a single way of thinking. She doesn't cling to obsolete ideas just for comfort. Her curiosity is inexhaustible. Her desire to understand has no limits. And that makes her a fascinating companion, someone with whom time never feels wasted. Her presence doesn't impose itself with empty words or exaggerated gestures. She doesn't need others' approval to feel valid, nor does she seek to fit into predefined molds. Her authenticity is her letter of introduction, and that's the reason why those who know her can't help but feel attracted to her essence. There's nothing forced in her, nothing that pretends to fit into an artificial narrative. Her way of seeing the world isn't dictated by what others expect of her, but by her own understanding of herself and the reality that surrounds her. When someone enters her life, they don't find a diluted version of who she is. She doesn't accommodate to please or adjust to others' expectations. She shows herself with all her dimensions, with her complexity, with her intensity. Her love is neither lukewarm nor conditioned, but it's also not something she gives without discernment. Not everyone has access to her inner world because she has learned to value her energy and protect it from those who don't understand or don't deserve it. Her way of seeing relationships is neither naive nor cynical. She doesn't idealize love, but she doesn't reject it out of fear of suffering either. She doesn't seek to fill voids with the company of others because her fullness doesn't depend on anyone other than herself. She doesn't cling to what doesn't flow. She doesn't force connections that don't make sense. If someone is in her life, it's because she has chosen them, not because she needs them. And when she feels that something no longer contributes, she knows how to let go without resentment, without rancor, without fear. The intensity with which she lives each experience doesn't mean she lets herself be dragged by her emotions without control. On the contrary, she has learned to recognize them, to feel them without letting them define her, to listen to them without letting them dictate her every step. She doesn't repress what she feels, but she doesn't allow her feelings to govern her either. Her balance is not the result of indifference, but of awareness. She allows herself to feel, but she doesn't get lost in what she feels. For those who observe her from the outside, she may seem an enigma, not because she tries to be, but because her depth is not something that anyone can immediately understand. She doesn't let herself be read so easily, not because she hides, but because her essence cannot be summarized in a few words. There are layers in her that are only revealed with time, with trust, with true connection. And those who have the privilege of knowing her beyond the surface know that her value doesn't reside in the image she projects, but in the solidity of her character, in the coherence with which she lives her life. When she's in a room, Her energy changes the dynamics of the space without the need for a single grandiloquent gesture. She's not someone who strives to be seen, but her presence is felt. She's not one who seeks attention, but receives it without asking. It's not because she tries, but because what she is cannot go unnoticed. Her confidence is silent. Her charisma is not manufactured. Those around her can perceive it, though they may not always be able to explain it. Her strength doesn't make her someone inaccessible. She's not cold or distant. She doesn't close herself to experiences or protect herself behind an unbreakable armor. But she's also not someone who gives herself without reservations to those who don't know how to value what is before them. She doesn't rush to trust, not because she fears being hurt, but because she knows her energy is not for everyone. Her vulnerability is a privilege that only a few can know, because she doesn't offer it to those who haven't shown they deserve it. The difference between her and many other people is that she doesn't seek to be understood at all costs. She doesn't feel the need to explain who she is or justify her decisions. She doesn't seek approval or anguish when others fail to see her true value. She knows that not everyone is prepared to understand her, and that doesn't worry her. Her path is not defined by external validation, but by her own internal clarity. As she advances in life, she becomes someone even more sure of herself, even more the owner of her destiny. She doesn't let herself be trapped by the past. She doesn't cling to what no longer makes sense. She knows when to close chapters, when to change direction, when to reinvent herself. She doesn't stay in places where she doesn't grow. She doesn't maintain relationships that wear her down. Her instinct tells her when it's time to move forward, and she listens without hesitation. Her presence is a reminder that true strength doesn't reside in imposing oneself on others, but in the ability to sustain oneself without depending on external factors. She doesn't seek to dominate or be dominated. Her power doesn't come from control, but from freedom. She doesn't need to be followed or adored. She doesn't seek to be admired, but it's impossible not to do so. The truly unforgettable woman stands as a quiet revolution in a world of performative existence. She doesn't arrive at this state through calculation, but through the courage to integrate her full humanity, shadows and light intertwined. What Jung understood, and what our souls recognize without words, is that authentic presence creates a gravity field that no curated image can match. The paradox reveals itself. In releasing the desperate need to be valued by others, she becomes invaluable. In abandoning the pursuit of being irreplaceable, she becomes precisely that. Her power emanates not from dominance, but from wholeness, the rare courage to exist without apology or performance. She reminds us of our deepest longing, not to possess perfection, but to encounter truth. And in a world drowning in carefully constructed illusions, nothing is more magnetic than a woman who has made peace with her own reality, who offers not a reflection of what others wish to see, but the revolutionary gift of genuine human presence. This is not the end of her journey. It is merely the beginning of living without masks, loving without conditions, and leaving an imprint not because she tried, but because she simply, powerfully was.